Oh, hold on. It looks like we are recording now. I'm not used to this because I took a long break, but we have arrived. We are back for another episode to talk about all things Hawks during this summer. On the other end, it's coming up on my screen as full court press, but I'm going to go ahead and allow you to introduce yourselves to the crew because you are no guest to this podcast.
Yeah, I didn't know which email account I was logged into, so I didn't know how I was showing up. But yeah, Glenn Willis here, contributor to Peachtree Hoops, just like Josh. And we're in the midst of generating all of our draft profiles. I do record a podcast with my twin brother, and we've added a third person, kind of recent, at least, to cover the playoffs. That's Full Court Press NBA podcast. But don't even that's a kind of a league-wide focus. So for your listeners, Brad's podcast and your podcast certainly should be a higher priority for them. But we do cover kind of league-wide analysis on that podcast. If anyone has interest and wants to check it out, that'd be appreciated.
Well, that's much appreciated. Full Court Press is awesome, everybody. And I really do like how you did add for the playoffs. I have only caught a couple episodes, not all of them, so please forgive me.
Oh, no,
please forgive me, Glenn. I'm sorry.
They're long. We're like a volume score right now. We're still trying to figure out how to do it more efficiently.
Okay.
But we do try to go pretty in depth. But we still definitely need to improve on being able to hit that depth without taking as much time as we can for now. But we've only been at it a year, so we're still infants in this endeavor and still trying to get better. So.
Great. And since it's an ongoing joke, I'm going to go ahead and call you Greg right now and get it out of the way so we can go ahead and reprimand me for it.
It's only been happening to me my whole life. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate your sense of humor. So, Glenn, what's going on? The Hawks have been much different since the last time I've recorded. We got a new head coach, Lloyd Pierce, who is very defensive oriented. Do you have a quick kind of 30-second synopsis or thoughts on him before I ask you a question about him?
Well, I like a lot of other people. I don't know much about him apart from kind of what the organization and he have kind of put forward. And so that's really all I have to go on. Philadelphia was very good defensively last year, and all reports are that he was kind of definitely defensive coordinator and kind of running that in the court. So hopefully that reflects well on him. But I think probably the thing that I'm most encouraged about is that he just seems to be so highly regarded across the whole league.
Yes.
Whether it be other coaches or even the best players in the league, and the player development background he has. My biggest concern with losing Bud, I didn't always agree with kind of Bud's approach to scheme. He, like a lot of coaches, I thought he was a little stubborn and could have been more imaginative at times, but I think he's a very, very good coach. But that's the only time I kind of saw myself being frustrated with him. But he, of course, brought a very strong player development program and was concerned about that being something that they were able to still kind of make a central part or foundational part of their program. And since he has that background, that makes me feel very encouraged about the fact that this team's going to be young for a number of years, as Travis Schlenk has said. And so that player development background is and just how highly regarded he is across the league makes me feel like probably a really good hire. So I'm hopeful.
All right. Yeah, player development is very good for this team, who's going to be in the lottery for the foreseeable future. And it's good that we brought somebody in. That was the thing when I was looking at Lloyd Pierce, was everything that I've ever heard of him was like players, even like LeBron and Wade were saying, I'm so happy for my guy to get a chance. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he's obviously respected amongst players. And I've also heard about he's a defensive, his main thing is defense. And apparently there was a video of him dunking at a Hawks facility. So apparently he's in shape enough to get up and dunk a basketball. So that's a plus. That's what I like to see in my coach. they mentioned on the Bill Simmons podcast, I don't know if you listen, but someone was sarcastically mentioning of how there needs to be a aspect amongst coaches to see how fast you can get out of your seat in the half court to call a timeout. And someone said, I wonder if a coach like Stan Van Gundy or um, I don't know, someone would have difficulty compared to someone young like Brad Stevens of running, half the court to call a timeout and what the difference that makes to a team. So, with that quickness and agility from the dunking perspective, I am very excited for our coaches' prospects of such issues.
Yeah,
I know
and
you
and
haven't heard
also
this.
and
I know
also
you haven't ever.
in the scenarios where he's like trying to get the ref's attention, hopefully he's quick enough to not run into the official like bunch of
Oh,
times. So
yeah.
that lateral agility is important to avoid those suspensions and stuff.
And hopefully he's not drinking a cup of water like the previous Milwaukee Bucks coach in the instance if they need to call the timeout. Oh man,
Exactly. Yeah.
Jason Kidd. But anyway, we're getting the silliness out of the way earlier. That to me is when someone brought that up, I found that really funny. But on a serious note, we know little about this coach, and some fans I know might be concerned about this. This is something I saw, but with the idea of him being a young coach, him being defensive minded, should we be worried about going back to the late, uh, early 2000s, whatever, the Mike Woodson era of switching defenses, no real creativeness with play calling? Since this is a defensive coach, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that will. It's even more difficult to kind of project what we'll see on the offensive end because that'll really, for me, come down to the staff that he's able to build. And we haven't. I don't know that we've heard really many final decisions, but it sounds like Bud is wanting to take almost his entire coaching staff with him to Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I don't. In most cases, I think organizations don't stand in the way of that. Although I think all are under contract, so there's I don't know the technical aspects of how one resolves that, but just from what I've seen in the past, I don't organizations usually don't stand in the way if assistant coach wants to follow. I think we've heard now that Chris Jett is the one coach that's staying behind. He'd only been with the Hawks for 1 year, and he has a bit of history with Lloyd Pierce, and then the hire, I'm forgetting the coach's name, but the hire from Denver, I think we were sorry his last coaching, but that's not right. He was coaching somewhere else, but he was a interim head coach in Denver, and he seems to be more offensive minded. But yeah, it's really hard to know. But what makes it even kind of even more difficult on that end is that they had changed up their offensive scheme this past season to be drastically different from what it was, Bud's first 4 seasons or whatever it was.
Right.
And Dennis specifically really struggled with the scheme a lot. And so it's really hard for me to even kind of imagine what it's going to look like on that end. But I guess Utah Summer League isn't that far away, and Coach Pierce is has said he's going to coach there. So I'm going to guess that we'll get some sort of kind of sneak preview, if you will, in the Utah Summer League in terms of what kind of scheme they're running offensively. So while we don't know really anything now, early July, we should get a bit of a sneak preview, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. So just to not confuse the users, excuse me, not users, the listeners, and some confusion because I think I confused myself at one time for this. But the Hawks will be playing in the summer league in, um, geez, I just forgot the city, Vegas, and what's the other city? Where
Salt
else?
Lake. Salt Lake.
Salt Lake.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, Salt Lake City. Okay. um, so you're going to get a lot of Hawks this off season, and I, for one, am looking forward to it. So moving on, um, outside of caring about the 40 time for our coach. So let's get into some of the stuff with the Hawks right now going on. Not much current news outside of I guess, our coach and the craziness with Dennis. But do you think do you think we're going to see Dennis Schroeder on the team next year? Um, Amongst all the craziness of him giving his opinion on not wanting to play.
I think it's. I mean, it's a kind of. I think for most I'll kind of channel the casual Hawks fan as I think um, kind of the mindset is right now, and that no one would be disappointed necessarily to see him not on the team. But if I kind of put my analytical, kind of hat on, if you will, I think it's pretty significantly more likely than not that he will be on the team game one in October, just because I don't think he's a very movable asset right now. I don't know that across the league the point guard position is pretty stacked.
Right.
There are not any teams that have like a dire need of finding a point guard. You may say a team like Phoenix, depending upon what they do with Alfred Payton's restricted free agency, but there's not a team out there that has a obvious need to bring in a young point guard. And then Dennis is coming off of a second season as a starter where he improved in some areas. He cut down his turnovers and such, but his shooting really fell off, and that's really going to be the thing that determines whether he's ever going to be kind of a really credible starting point guard or not. I give him a little bit of slack last year because in the scheme they ran before last season, his shots came from very predictable spots on the floor, and he was a much better shooter, perimeter shooter in that scheme. In last year's scheme, his shots came from very unpredictable spots, and it's probably fair to understand that that was something he struggled with first year in that scheme. But the off the court stuff is also what everyone's talking about, and who knows how that's going to go. But his comments he made in the press conference in Germany, some of the other statements he's made, the way he's carried himself, some of the decisions he made, like being late getting back from the All-Star break, etc. To me, it just indicates that he just doesn't have the right people around him. And it can be hard as a guy from Europe, grew up in Germany, to be here as a young player with kind of a very colorful personality and all those sorts of things. And it's disappointing to me that he's this deep into his NBA career, and you think his agent or his representatives would be really tending to making sure that he has the right people around him, because if he had the right people around him, I don't think he ever makes those statements he made about kind of looking for a trade and even mentioning specific teams to get traded to. That's just not smart. It doesn't serve him well at all. It doesn't help in any way, shape, or form. So,
Nope.
for me, I just hope that as a young man that someone, and maybe this new coaching staff can maybe kind of be someone on the coaching staff, or Coach Pierce could be someone that kind of pulls him aside and says, who are you spending time with, and who around you is kind of offering you guidance, because he definitely can handle a lot of these things in a better way. And to me, that comes down to the people you have helping guide you through that. It's hard as a young man. I mean, not to make this about me, but I grew up largely without a father in the household, and so I kind of sympathize with him.
Yeah.
So he's young, but he's not. He's running out of time to kind of use that as an excuse. In my mind, it's this next year he needs to kind of really get his head on straight and try to get his career back on track. But in terms of him being tradable, I think if he were, Schlenk probably would move him. But I think the contract is, and then just his performance last season makes it almost impossible to see that actually happening.
Yeah. As you mentioned, like, everybody has a point guard in the NBA, and Dennis has, I believe, is it 2 more years on his contract?
I think
I'm doing
three. I believe three more.
3 more. Oh boy. Okay, that's worse than I thought. Yeah, he's with us. Did he wait? He signed the 4 year. That was last season, right?
He signed the extension last season, but
Okay.
that this year was the first year of the extension, I believe.
Okay.
I'm looking
Okay.
it up to make sure.
Okay. Well, while you're looking it up, my immediate thoughts when I heard this was the much more simpler and informal thought of, you're complaining about your role on a bad team, and Dennis, it was very questionable if you were even the best player on the team this year. That was my my initial immature thought there, but
Well, I mean, overall, he was across the season. He was a net negative player. The Hawks were better when he was on the
yeah,
bench. And the most interesting aspect of kind of thinking about Dennis's spot on the team and this new coach is how much defensive accountability will he Lloyd Pierce kind of handle with Dennis. And it was but the thing that most baffled me last year was that Bud has supposedly has this accountability mindset. He's not hesitant at all to call a timeout and get the player's face on the court in real time. And I don't really remember a single time that happened with Dennis last year. I remember it happening with Torian. I remember it happening with a few other guys. But then, Dennis got better across the season, but he was statistically one of the 5 worst defenders in the league. And when there wasn't improvement, it just baffled me that Coach Bud, it looked to me as an outsider like there wasn't really like any accountability around Dennis's defensive effort and execution. It just
yeah,
never made sense to me. And with Lloyd Pierce, I suppose a fresh voice, he can come in and say, "Hey, man, you have no equity with me at all. So if you're going to play, you're going to play defense. If you're not going to play defense, you're not going to play." And maybe this is kind of a maybe clean slate, if you will, with this new coach, and maybe we'll see better effort and focus on that end with this defensive-minded coach here.
yeah. Well, yeah, you're right because it just seemed later in the season the mistakes were becoming more obvious on the defensive end to me. I just remember one game I was watching later on in the season where everyone on the Hawks switched to a zone, and he was the only one still playing man to man. And I was just like, "Oh, come on, Dennis, pay attention." But yeah, anyway, it also doesn't help that he kind of is putting a target on himself with this. We know he has the whole legal issues that he's dealing with. We will see how that turns out. I don't want to comment on that now, but I'm looking at it right now, and he aired his grievances on Twitter, and it appears that players on the Hawks were tweeting back at him. Um,
Indirectly, yeah, but
Oh, I was going to say I'm looking at a Torian Prince way back, maybe I believe it was like a week and a half ago. They kind of had a little back and forth. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what Lloyd Pierce does with all of this. Talking to him, but this brings me to one of my favorite things I like to do, Glenn, is looking at the social media, or at least Twitter for the Hawks. Um, I love that Kent Bazemore, he has retweeted the Bleacher Report um, Game of Zones. I'm not sure if you are familiar with that at all.
yeah, I am because they advertise on during the games,
Yeah.
but I don't. It's not something I religiously watch.
It's just a quick 5 minute segment where they kind of like make a lot of in jokes, like a lot of jokes through, I guess, Game of Thrones. And if you watch the NBA, it makes sense, but slightly exaggerated. So Kent Bazemore retweeted it, said this is awesome. I believe very own Brad Rowland got retweeted by uh, Malcolm Delaney. Brad made the comment about Corver needing to be in the game more, and Malcolm says basically agreed. So you know what? It's I love social media because they say some crazy stuff on here.
They do. I'm not on as much as some others, but I certainly try to keep up on Twitter at least.
Oh yes. Okay.
But yeah,
Anyway,
the subtweeting was interesting. I'm not normally attracted to that type of stuff, but the subtweeting between Dennis and Torian and that Bayes tweet where I don't know if that was Larry's like, I don't know if it was a peace, saying peace out, or I have no idea what that tweet was about. But
Yeah, this is the world we live in right now, where you got to follow the news everywhere, no exceptions.
indeed, you will be kind of a little bit, a few steps behind if you don't, in terms of stay on top of what's actually going on or what could be going on.
Great. So now we're going to get into kind of the second half here. I wanted to bring you on and talk to you about the draft. As everybody knows, the Atlanta Hawks have the third pick in the NBA draft. They also have the 19th pick and the 30th in the first round. And some of the bigger debates. Now, I'm going to start with you on this pick right here. Some of the biggest debates is who the Hawks should take at number 3. So, first of all, I want to ask you, is there any chance Luka Doncic falls? Any chance Phoenix says, no, we want a big guy, and number 2, Kings, do something dumb like, I don't know, they'll take Bagley. Watch, I don't know. But is there a chance Doncic can fall to us? I hope I pronounced that right.
I think it's Doncic, but I'm not an expert on the pronunciation of
We're sticking with Luka then. I'm sticking with Luka.
Luka works for me.
Okay.
Is there some chance? Yes. Do I feel like it's likely? I feel like it's less than a 50% chance. But I'm hoping that's what happens. I mean, when I look at all of the mocks, so many mocks have Ayton going first. And then if he went first, a lot of the mocks love Bagley. And then some of the more kind of analytical evaluators like Jaren Jackson Jr. But it does seem like everybody agrees the first 4 will be Luka, Bagley, Ayton, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Although some people talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. like he should be like closer to 10th and 5th. But there does seem to be a consensus that those 4 guys are likely to be the first 4 off the board. And a lot of people are projecting Ayton first. Like I think 70% of the mocks I see have Ayton first, and then if Phoenix takes Ayton, Sacramento is really hard to try to speculate on what they'll do. They love players from that region, from the like Slovenia and that region because of their ownership and their front office leadership and stuff. So it'd be a little weird to see them pass on him, but they also love De'Aaron Fox, and I don't know if they think those two can kind of really share the basketball. So there's some chance, but Doncic is so good. I feel like it's unlikely, but not out of the realm of possibility. But I'm hoping that's what happens. So to go on record.
Now, I will be really hurt if he falls to us and we pass on him as well.
Oh, same.
I'll be beside myself right there if that happens. But I was looking at some mocks and I said, well, number 1, they could take Ayton. Although I feel number 1, I don't know why they don't take Luka, Phoenix. Just thinking of that wing possibility of Booker, Josh Jackson, Luka, that could be something to kind of like build around right there. But if they want a big man, Ayton is there, and he did play for the University of Arizona, so that would get them some extra fans there.
Yeah, their owner is a big University of Arizona supporter. That may mean something, but who knows? But I guess the one thing, depending upon how that front office looks at it, is they may think that Josh Jackson and Doncic are completely redundant in terms of seeing them kind of fitting the same role. I think that's a ridiculous kind of perspective. You need as many offensive creators as possible, and offensive creators should be able to play together and actually create a lot of stress on the defense by having more than one creator. Josh Jackson is an elite passer. I don't know if all fans know that, but he sees every pass and he's really precise passer. But that could a dumb front office, if you will, could look at that and go, oh, they're too redundant. Let's get something more complementary. But so and then the Kings make stupid decisions all the time. And Phoenix is not the most respected front office either. So if the
The
Hawks had to,
Kings, no.
yeah, the Hawks slid into the third spot and they fell behind two front offices that don't have the greatest track record, but at the same time, the best players in this draft class appear to be so obvious that even not the most forward-thinking front offices is probably still going to get it right.
Well, if I were Phoenix, I would take him one just because you look at some of the at least the teams still in the playoffs. You need those multiple wing guys that can handle the ball, and basically at any time you could at least have two of them on the floor if you're Phoenix. But you know what? That is just my opinion. I
For
could,
sure. Like, for example, Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili never had any problem playing together. So it was just
yeah.
one kind of historical, Hall of Fame level example, but they made it work.
And you see what they're kind of doing in Boston right now between, like they'll have Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown on the floor at the same time. And you see how that's going for them. But
Right, and none of them are as good a passers as Doncic is. So,
yeah, that's
they're good.
that's just me though. But hopefully Phoenix, does Atlanta a solid and they go for Ayton, number one. And hopefully number two, they see De'Aaron Fox as their primary ball handler, and they'll be like, you know what, let's get some post scoring since all our guys are old down there.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
could
know.
go Ayton Bagley. That's not. It wouldn't be crazy if that's what happened.
Yeah, that wouldn't be crazy. And then, so say Luca does fall to Atlanta, and say it does go Ayton Bagley, 1 and 2. Who do you think? I know we would want Luca, but who do you think the Hawks like front office would consider taking at that point?
I would hope it's Luca. I mean, I know that like about a month ago, Chris Livermore put out. I think he did a radio hit where he was saying some of what he was hearing was that Schlink wasn't very high on him. But then since then, Schlink has gone on record to say some more positive things about him. But my viewpoint is that offensive creators are the hardest things to find in the league, and so I would hope that that's what they would do. But also when you hear reporters like Chris Livermore, and I'm definitely not trying to speak negatively of him. He has to report what he's hearing.
Right.
But organizations intentionally put out misinformation this time of year, so you can't really believe much of what you hear on that front. So, like for example, when Steph Curry, I remember in the Steph Curry draft, that Phoenix was sure they were going to be able to get him, and they thought they were right there, and then Golden State grabbed him, and no one knew that Golden State even had any inkling. And then last year, word is now that Donovan Mitchell had an incredible workout with Utah, and their GM Dennis Lindsey threatened their whole organization that if anybody leaked it, that they were all getting fired. So they made sure that no, because he was. They had to trade up to get even to 13 where they drafted him, and there was a lot of clandestine type of stuff going on there to try to keep a low profile in terms of how excited they were about the possibility of getting him. So, just can't believe anything you hear in terms on that front this time of year at all.
Yeah, totally believable. When I was in college, I wrote a paper on the book Moneyball, and there is a very, very similar situation in that movie. That book and movie. I forget the player's name. I want to say Chris Swisher. Anyway, basically the whole thing was how he was saying it's also, outside of the analytics, it's also a mental game, like you're playing poker. And he said one player he absolutely loved, and he loved him so much he purposely did not go to the workouts just to make people think he didn't like him. And I'm pretty sure the Braves did that with Jason Hayward when he was playing for Atlanta. Went out of their way to make sure they didn't look interested. And we're seeing it right now in the NBA. So I don't believe anything that I hear, because the same could be said about Bagley. We heard, a long time ago, at least from the Hawks front offices, they weren't really impressed with Bagley. But now we're hearing that, we like Bagley. So I don't trust anything.
Yeah, Jonathan Gavoni, I think is his name, formerly of Draft Express, now with ESPN, basically said if Bagley's there, they're taking him
Yeah.
100%, no doubt about it. And I don't believe that either.
Yeah. And okay, so moving on from Luca, you brought up Bagley, and let me go into the triple J, that's what I like to call it, versus Bagley. Bagley, but my friend Garrick, who hopefully listeners remember, he texts me bag three. That's what he calls him to save time in texts. He says JJJ and triple J in bag three. So, so let me ask you, what do you is how we hear how if Bagley is there, we'll get him, 100% of the time if he's there at three. Is it? Do we need to worry about Bagley and John Collins in the sense of repetitiveness in the players? Because or do we even care about that because of where the Hawks are in the draft right now? Like they're not going to be competing for the playoffs next year, or do we even care about that?
Uh, in my mind, it shouldn't not be a thing. As excited as everyone is about John Collins, and I'll remind your listeners that I wrote the draft profile last year on John Collins, and it was not glowing.
Right.
But the things he did at Wake Forest were not indicative that he was an NBA ready player at all. But that just goes to prove that sometimes, like for example, if you watch Karl-Anthony Towns at Kentucky, you would have no idea that he was as NBA ready as he was. He still has issues on defense, but he's putting up historically great numbers for the position he plays at the age he's playing at. So sometimes guys are completely different players in the NBA. But fit with Collins, I don't think Bagley and Collins are going to kind of be in each other's space at all. I think they can function together. I think Bagley's going to become a knockdown shooter, and I think Collins showed a lot of promise even shooting from the corner this last season. And so, but they're both very fast, and so if you're looking to play fast, it's actually really tough on a defense when both players that play at the 4 and the 5 are both fast. That's hard to deal with. I think there's some fit. I think those who are saying there are fit issues, I disagree with that. In terms of how I see them developing at the next level. But even if there were fit issues, the Hawks don't have a single player on the roster that's good enough yet for that even to be a consideration, in my opinion.
Right. So that's kind of why I wanted to ask if it even matters, because I flip flop between the two like every day, Jaren Jackson and Bagley.
Yep.
Okay, just because with Jaren Jackson, it seems to me you get a guy who is, I guess you'd say, more suited all around and kind of be thrown into any kind of system. It doesn't matter who he plays with. Whereas if you have Bagley, at least my initial review, again, I'm no expert with scouting or college players or anything. It just seems like if you get him, you have to build the team around in a certain way. Whereas with Jaren Jackson, he's very adaptable. And we know the Hawks are going to be in the lottery again next year, but say our new Lloyd Pierce acts like a rookie head coach and he looks a little lost next season, and the Hawks end up with a bottom 3 record, and we end up having a top 3 pick again. I feel like there are certain, say, I don't know who's the big guy that's supposed to be in next year's draft. Zion Williams.
Williamson, I think.
Yeah, Zion Williamson.
I'll look it up too.
I'm just saying, say he's there, and say magically the Hawks get that as a pick. the fit for him and Bagley would be more him, Bagley, and John Collins to me would be more difficult than just like getting someone like Jaren Jackson, who I feel you could just throw into anything. So I don't know. That is my argument for Jaren Jackson. But I don't know. I'm just telling people this. I hope I am not confusing, and I hope I'm not going crazy. But should that matter at all, or should we just still go with talent, scoring, whatever?
Yeah, I don't think it matters at all because you haven't even seen that 2019 class. I mean, for sure, all the NBA teams are um, already kind of in early evaluation mode there, but the evaluation in like a year from now on that group is going to be completely different. Well, the Hawks will be one of the worst five, if not the worst three teams in the league last year. I had predicted they would win more games than they ended up winning. And the reason I did was because last year I think Schlink was appeasing Bud a little bit by bringing in veterans like Babbitt and Dedman and trading for Marco Bellinelli and Bud just didn't want to work with exclusively young players. He wanted some veterans and wanted to see what he could make of it. And Schlink smartly, some want to criticize him for them not having a worse record. But some of those veterans definitely kind of helped them. But it also helped that like Dedman was hurt for a while, and that held them back a little bit, and it definitely hurt them that they had to play Plumlee a lot during the middle of the season and stuff. But I don't think you're going to see Schlink kind of go out and get some of those veteran types of players that he did last year to kind of appease Bud. And so I think Schlink and Pierce. I think one of those positive aspects of the change is that I think they'll both commit to just playing with a very young roster and not being too worried about bringing in veterans that are going to play. You want to bring in one or two veterans to kind of help be mentors, fine, but they don't have to play, or they don't have to play a lot. So I do think they're going to just commit to being very young, and young teams aren't good. So they should have a good draft pick next year. But on the whole Bagley versus Jaren Jackson Jr. thing, there is no right or wrong answer there for me. It just comes down to philosophy, what your draft philosophy is. And I guess I'll simplify this. Some people articulate their philosophy is you try to find your great player, right? Everybody needs a great player to have any chance to contend. And especially if you're looking for a guy who can really power your offense and be special offensively, and really handle a lot of the offensive responsibility and making things happen on the offensive end. If that's the case, you probably want to take a shot with Bagley. But in the modern NBA, finding centers that can play throughout an entire postseason and not kind of get played off the court in certain matchups, that's becoming a very rare thing as well. So you've seen players that get played off the court at the center position and just can't really be used in some matchups. And what's really strong about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s game is that he's so well-rounded. He's able to handle a switching defense or a defense where the big man drops. He's comfortable getting out on the perimeter on defense, and then on offense he can shoot. He can put the ball on the court, but he's not a guy that needs the ball all the time, so he could be kind of a supporting role player on the offensive end. Or, I mean, who knows? He's never really been in a situation where he's been allowed to kind of just try to go create his own shot. And he's so young that like 2 years from now, he could. Everybody's just projecting him as a like 13 point, 10 rebound, 2 block guy or whatever. But I mean, I don't know any reason why he can't get to like be like a 20, 22 point score. It just depends upon usage and volume, But for me, if you want to take, if the philosophy is let's just get a group of good players in here, Jaren Jackson Jr. might be the way to go. If the philosophy is nope, we're going to swing for the fences and try to get like a Hall of Fame caliber player. Bagley has a higher ceiling, but Jackson has a very, very well-rounded game, especially for his age. So to me, I'm going to be happy with either one, and it's just a matter of kind of what your philosophy is. Do you look for a guy who could, Bagley could be a guy that leads the league in scoring one day. That's possible. Or Jackson is definitely a better two-way player. If you take Bagley, you have to believe you can teach him to play defense. and that's because he has a long way to go on that end. Where with
Yeah.
Jackson can he has an NBA game that's ready on both ends like right away. He'll make mistakes as a rookie, but his skill set and his physical profile are ready to just kind of drop him right in and let him start just getting repetitions and learning and improving from that end. So it just comes down to philosophy in my mind.
Right. So no worries about getting Trey Young this early.
Oh no, not. I mean, in my mind, they would have to trade back, and it just doesn't make any sense in terms of what Schlenk has talked about. But everybody's kind of hating on Trey Young right now. But if Trey Young goes sixth, seventh, or eighth, I think an organization will be taking an appropriate risk on him. He has a special ability to create his own shot. He has, he can shoot the ball from 35 feet. He's going to need a ton of help to work on the defensive end. But I mean, like I said, 6, 7, 8. Any team who gets him in that range, that's appropriate in my mind. But he's not nearly good enough to try to crack into this top four. And it's not even close in my mind.
So who do you have as your top five on your little big board that you have?
Yeah. So
Donkey, no, Luca, Aiton, and
yeah, Aiton's kind of divisive too, just because it's been a while since we've seen a center that was the best offensive player on like a contender. I guess Shaq is the outlier, the greatest historical outlier in the history of NBA, probably. Um, and even Ayton has more ball skill than Shaq did. Shaq had more ball skill than I think people would give him credit for. But I mean, when you look at a guy like Ayton and how enormous he is, and how much of ball skill he has, I mean, he's not ready to apply it all kind of in an NBA context, but he's clearly in that top four. So Doncic, Bagley, Jared Jackson Jr., and Ayton are kind of that first tier. If you had to ask me who I would put fifth behind that group, man, it's kind of wide open there for me.
yeah,
I like Michael Porter Jr. Is a guy that's he's like an enormous wing. He's like a 7-foot wing, but he's got that medical history. If you feel good about where he is medically, that's fine. And then there are questions about his motor and his effort and his intensity, but worth a risk there. But I mean that second tier is like wide open. I don't know that I would put Bamba there, but I mean I would have to see like Bamba work out. Like if I were the GM, never could happen, obviously. But I'm imagining myself in that role. I would have to see Bamba work out. I'd want to interview him and talk to him and see if he kind of stands out from that group. And I'm not going to be super surprised to see Trey Young taken around fifth either. But like I said, in that 6 to 8 range, I think it's reasonable to consider Trey. So if I say 6 to 8, then 5's not crazy either. And I just wanted to pull up the draft order. To see who's picking there, because one differentiator there, okay, there's not really any contenders until you get to potentially Cleveland at 8 and then Philadelphia at 10. Those two teams might be looking for like more NBA veteran players, like one of the Bridges is. I think we might be talking about them in a bit, but there's not an obvious fifth player for me. So I have a top 4. That fifth player could be one of like 6 players in my mind.
Okay, well, I'm sure in the weeks to come we will talk more about the draft coming up, but that was my initial thought. So you did bring up something about NBA's, rather the censors, which is something I brought up to some people and kind of questioned. And something that I wondered is with how the NBA is going today, it seems like you want more of the 6'9", 6'8", 6'6", 6'9", 6'10" kind of player for their versatility to guard both on the wing and in the post, and the ability to kind of like switch on defense. Um, and we're seeing that kind of in the NBA finals, not, excuse me, the NBA playoffs right now. Golden State was going up against Houston, and there were moments where we were seeing Capella, only moments, but Capella getting played off the floor. And we were seeing moments where, like, when the speed got too quick, we were seeing a Gobert kind of not really stay on the floor. And same with other centers. So if we're early in the draft, Should we be worried about taking a big guy because of this? And as you mentioned with the two bridges, Miles and McKell, wouldn't their draft stock kind of like increase?
It could. I think what we're seeing across the league is that um, you have to be really, really good on the wing, and then to be even better, you need a wing or two that can kind of play up to the power forward position, if not sometime at the five. Like PJ Tucker's playing a lot of five for Houston
Yeah, great
in
example.
this series.
Yes.
So, and then Draymond is obviously kind of the guy that everyone thinks about in that role, but even like LeBron, one of the greatest players of all time, can be your rim protector at times. He has to figure out how much energy he has for that. But yeah, I do
Yeah.
think that like when I look at like Michael Porter Jr., all those questions you have because of the fact that he has that size and really has the skill set of the wing, that makes him really intriguing. Depending on, like I said, his medical and then his motor. But I think that this kind of narrative about centers not really having a place in the modern NBA, I know I way oversimplified how I said that, but in my mind, it's not really about the position. I'll go back to your word. It's about versatility. And so centers that are limited in speed and agility, you definitely have a concern about those guys not being very useful in a postseason run. And then secondly, centers that don't have much skill. Also, you would have a concern that they're going to be useful in kind of a deep postseason run. And it's not an either or. Like if you have one or the other, you're fine. No, I don't think that's true at all. I think if you have one or the other, there are fewer matchups where you are not going to be usable. But if you can find a center that has both good agility, good speed, and good ball skill, defense can't just ignore them. That player is extremely valuable, and that's why I do think like Jaren Jackson Jr. deserves so much consideration. Because if you look up and down this draft, Aiton, Bamba, Wendell Carter, all of those names of those big guys, there are concerns about are do they have enough speed, agility, etc. And then sometimes even like a guy like Aiton, he's a freak physically, but the mental speed, decision making in real
Right.
time, is that
Yeah.
there? That's a thing too. Which is
Yeah.
why, even
Well,
though Marvin Bagley could be a 10-time All-Star and lead the league in scoring in 5 years of his career, that's a possible outcome for him. Jaren Jackson Jr. deserves so much consideration because even at his young age, he's already shown the ability to defend away from the rim, near the rim, solid decision maker, can put the ball on the floor, can shoot, he's a good passer in the pick and roll. He can do all three things. He can dive toward the rim, he can pick and pop, or he can get in that, if the defense dictates, that short roll where he gets the ball and has to decide to either pass, shoot, or put it on the floor. He can do all of that, and so that's I have no concern about Jaren Jackson Jr. being a guy that can play in almost any postseason matchup, but that's may not be true of any of the other centers in this draft.
Okay. So say like a player like, well, Aiton, his defensive issues, which they're talking about his lack of blocks at his size, and some of the issues I've seen is like his rotation issues, which is going to be huge if that continues. But say like him or Mo Bamba, you know what you're getting from guys like that. Mo Bamba for his defensive ability near the rim, Aiton his scoring, as you mentioned. But I'm just worried, like, say you pick them early and you can't play them, in later rounds of the playoffs because um, Bomba isn't kind of like as skilled offensively.
For sure.
Um, and you have to worry about that. And it just worries me for like, say, and this goes back to Jaren Jackson, like you said, like to me, he can be thrown into anything. That was kind of like the safe pick for me, why I mentioned him earlier. You don't have to worry about what you do for the team draft wise in the future, but also like say the playoffs, it's like, oh, you could just throw him into anything. He could defend, he can spot up, hit a shot. So I don't know. That was just my question. If we are kind of overvaluing some of those guys, um, and also if we need to give the 2009 through 2012 Atlanta Hawks an apology. The Marvin Williams, Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, Horford Hawks an apology just because they had that versatility. But that's just that is just my 2 cents on that.
A team ahead of its time, and if you could like you know find the time machine to move that group into the modern NBA and just make Josh Smith a better decision maker in general, that'd be an interesting team to see in the landscape of the current NBA for sure.
Give that team, um, well, I was going to say switch Josh Smith with Millsap, but no. You know what? We'll just say that have that team, but switch coaches, switch Woodson to Budenholzer.
That would be super interesting.
That would have been a really interesting team to watch. I still would have had issues at the point guard watching them, but you know, oh man, reminiscing on the past. So, so that now that we have that, so Miles Bridges and Mikal Bridges, who I thought were related for a second, where are they going in the draft? Like, are they kind of in that second or third tier of players?
I think that for me, Mikal Bridges is in that second tier, and Miles Bridges is maybe kind of knocking on the door of that second tier. And I think that a lot of fans. So I'll remind the listeners, I don't watch college basketball. So what my whole draft evaluation process is when the NBA playoffs gets to a point where there's not a game every night, that's when I start going really deep on the evaluation. I DVR a lot of college games, have a way to store them, and kind of go back. But I don't go back and watch the games. I go back and watch the players. Um, and so Mikal Bridges is a two-way player in the way that Miles Bridges is not. Miles Bridges profiles as a guy who could be like an elite wing defender. And I know you look at his numbers and he can knock down shots and those sorts of things, but he's just not. He's very slow and methodical offensively, and I'm concerned that the speed of the NBA game is going to cause a lot of what he did offensively at the college level to not translate very well on the offensive end. He's a good shooter. He has a clean shot, but his release is a little slow. He's really slow kind of getting his feet down. And part of that's just that he's a wide, big dude, and that's where a lot of his potential defensive value comes from. But Mikal Bridges can shoot, he can put the ball on the floor, he can pass, he has an incredibly high IQ. He played in a high motion offense at the college level, is probably the one college team that plays most like the NBA of any team in the NCAA. And so I think Mikal Bridges is on a whole another level from Miles Bridges. I know that on a lot of mocks, you see them kind of go one after the other, and like 50% one's ahead of the other, and but for example, when I look at Cleveland at 8 and Philly at 10, you look at like Mikal Bridges and you're like, oh, you think, oh, that dude can step in and help that team right away. Or with Miles Bridges, again, like I said, I think the risk that you have with him, unlike Mikal, is just what he did offensively at the college level. To me, there are serious questions about whether that translates at the NBA level or not. Are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure what happened, but let me start over kind of what I was saying.
Okay.
Um so with Mo Bamba and um DeAndre Ayton possibly falling, could a player like Mikal Bridges, who you say is the who's better in a sense, could we see him just move up just on the sheer fact of his position?
Um, I think you could, and I'm looking back at their age now. Miles Bridges is 20, so and Mikal is 21. But I had forgotten that Miles was so young. Again, a lot of people kind of mash them up in their minds, and I've even struggled with that until I had a chance to dig in. And still, I even have to go back and look at my notes. And like I said, the simple thing that stands out as a separator to me is that I think Mikel's game will translate on both ends of the court, and Miles's may not. Um, but I with Miles Bridges being 20, those teams like 4 through 7 might give him some consideration, um, because once you get past that top group, there aren't a lot of guys that you could see as kind of being a primary offensive initiator. I don't think anyone sees Miles Bridges as being a guy who's going to be a primary creator, maybe help facilitate on the second unit and those sorts of things. Um, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because I think 1 through 7, everyone's going to be looking for young prospects with a ton of upside. And I think organizations will have varying opinions on how much upside there is in Miles Bridges' game. And then some teams might look at Mikal Bridges as one of those defenders that can kind of start at the 3 and even swing over to the 5 at times, like PJ Tucker does, for example, in Houston. So there can be a lot of usefulness there. And offensively, because PJ Tucker plays with guys like James Harden or Chris Paul, sometimes all he has to do is stand in the corner and just knock down open threes. If that's what happens, he doesn't really need to do much more. And so I think if a team feels like they have their offensive creator, that they're not still in need of going out and getting those primary offensive creators onto their team, then I think that those are the types of teams that might look at the Bridges players as being worth going top 10. But any team, such as the Hawks, for example, that does not believe they have their primary creators already, really shouldn't be giving much of a look at these guys unless there's just not anybody that they see as a potential offensive creator. But some guys that are projected like 15 to 20 to 25 have some limitations in their game, but there are offensive creators that are getting projected later, later in the draft, and where one of the 2 Bridges players might get drafted.
Interesting. Well, okay. Well, glad we wrapped that up. So, as a very quick early just guesstimation, who do you have at who do you like at 19?
My dream outcome is Lonnie Walker, the kid from Miami. And it's funny because when I just saw some of his play at the NCAA level, that I was surprised that I ended up being as high as him. But once I started digging into kind of his raw skills, and then remembering that he started the season injured, and then got kind of thrust into having to really carry all of the offensive workload for Miami. But it's funny because everybody's talking about him as this year's, quote, Donovan Mitchell. And I'm sure that's a comparison that his agent is very happy to have out there. But it's funny. He has almost the same physical profile as Donovan Mitchell. And then I was looking at his shooting motion. I was like, God, that looks exactly like Donovan Mitchell's shooting motion. But I don't think, even though most mocks have him going around 22 to 25, I think it's very unlikely he's going to be available at 19. He is an incredible prospect. He still has a lot to add to his game, but he's so young. He's really bouncy, really fast, and his ball skill is far enough along that you can see that kind of working out. He could be a very special player. And so in this draft, I feel like someone's going to take a chance on him. It may be in the lottery, like say 12 or 13, where Donovan Mitchell went last year. But that's my dream. But what I'll say is that since he's unlucky to be there, if the draft gets to say 14 or 15, and he's there, the Hawks should look at moving either 30 or 33. And in my mind, it'd be worth trading one of those 2 picks to move up like 3 or 4 spots to have a shot at him. So I'm going to be very happy if they end up with Lonnie Walker. But even if it costs one of those draft picks, I don't think you move the Cleveland pick for next year's draft right now, just because you don't know how good Cleveland is. And I think that's top 10 protected going off my mind. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. Yes.
Yeah. But I think enough of him. So, but if Lonnie Walker's not available, the names I have here are Kevin Knox. And when I did my evaluation, Kevin Knox played at Kentucky. A beautiful shot. He's a rangy guy, and I wrote down he reminds me of a little bit of Kyle Anderson, which would usually make people go running, right, screaming in the direction. But like, because he's not a very like fast switch athlete. He's not very explosive athlete. But he's extremely fluid, just not very explosive. But a Kyle Anderson with a knockdown 3-point shot would be an incredibly valuable player. So that's a name I have penciled in. And then Shake Milton, the kid from SMU, I think would be a good get there as well. And then another interesting name, I'd have to give it a lot of thought, is Jonte Porter. So the brother of Michael Porter Jr. is a big man. He's not very explosive either. He is a guy that you'd be concerned about. Can he defend deep in a postseason context? Or, he's a guy who would be a risk. But at 19, you're not. If you take a big man, you're not going to get a guy who can play in all matchups, because if he was that capable of doing that, he wouldn't be available at 19. But he's a good shooter. He's good in the short roll. He's good in the post. He's good. He has good face-up game. He's good with back to basket. But a little bit like when I was talking about Miles Bridges, I think I got Miles' names backward a minute ago, so apologies for that. The kid at Nova is the better prospect, so let's say that. But Jonte Porter is a big man who is an extremely smart defender, not super explosive, but really, really smart team defender, and he has a lot of useful skills on offense. So I'd rather have Lonnie Walker, Kevin Knox, Shake Milton ahead of him, but he's a guy that wouldn't be ridiculous to take at 19. So those are the names that I have there.
Okay. So
the guy, I'm going to throw a party.
You know what? I like it, at least with how you described him. Who's the guy from Villanova that everyone went crazy for? Because I think I've seen some mocks with him around.
Are you talking about Jalen Brunson or Dante DiVincenzo?
The one I can't pronounce his last name. That one.
So the guy who won the most outstanding player of the NCAA tournament, I think. Yeah. Dante DiVincenzo is a guy. I think he's not quite good enough to project at 19. There's just too many wings with emerging offensive skills that have they try to find one example. Keita Bates Diop, for example, the kid from Oklahoma State. He's a 4-year player, so he's not like a young dude, but he's like 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan, and basically ran an offense at that level. That's a guy that you look at his wingspan, and I don't see you taking a guy like DiVincenzo over a guy like that. There's a few other guys. I won't waste time reading through all the names of those guys that have like really long wingspans and some offensive skills. But that's why DiVincenzo, to me, is a much, much stronger consideration at like 30 or 34. I would not use 19 on him.
Okay. All right. Well.
But I wouldn't be upset at all if they got him at 30 or 34. So.
All righty then. Well, I think that wraps it up for us. I know we have been recording for a long time now. At least I think so. And I'm sure at this point in the podcast, if you're still listening, I very much appreciate you guys for listening. But I'll let you guys go, and hopefully I will be back next week. Yeah. Glenn, was there anything else you wanted to throw in or add?
No, last thing is keep an eye on Aaron Holiday, the guy that could be a good get at 30 or 34. I know Brad thinks he's not going to be on the board there. He's the younger brother of Justin and Drew Holiday and is a ridiculous shot maker. He doesn't have much else to his game yet, but he's a ridiculous like deep shot maker. So keep an eye on that. But no, otherwise, Josh, I really appreciate you having me back. I'm glad to see you back. I know everyone in the Petrie Hoops community and kind of the Hawks universe enjoys when you're putting content out regularly. I always enjoy when you have others on, whether it's Patrick or Sam or Brad or whoever, right? And so just keep at it, man.
Cool.
This is good content, and I like your rotation of guests, and I'm honored to be in that rotation. So thanks for having me back.
Well, I thank you for coming on once again, and thank you for everything, and coming on and joining me and making me feel smart by making all of my crazy theories actually sound like they have some sense going with them. That's some of my favorite stuff to do. And hopefully next week, within the next week, you'll go out and tell coaches, you'll tell people that our coach, one of the more athletically gifted coaches out there, that you got to really consider his time to run from the bench to half court to call a timeout. Like, we can make that an argument. That's our next thing to do.
For sure. You never know. That could end up being the difference between the win and the loss, and a game 6 or game 7 of playoff. It could be a thing. You never know.
It could be the difference between Dennis jacking up a terrible 3-pointer or not. So
it's funny. We saw it in that one game the Warriors lost where they got a pretty good shot in the game, but after the game, Kerr said he wanted to call a timeout. And of course, he has those back issues and stuff like that. But
hey, yeah,
to nerd out in the last, I don't know if fans know, but the visiting team gets to choose whether they're going to play offensively in front of their bench or defensively in front of their bench in the second half. And a lot of coaches choose defense because they want to be able to, because you give a lot more verbal commands as a coach on the defensive end, and so they're in closer proximity to make those defensive calls. But a lot of coaches choose offense specifically for the purpose of being able to call a timeout very late in the game if they need to. It's hard to come from the other end because all 3 officials are on the other end of the court. And in that case, Mike D'Antoni chooses to put his defense in front of him in the second half, which meant Kerr couldn't get down there and call that timeout. So to me, that's a super interesting thing. That I might be the only person in the world who finds how coaches choose what they put in front of them in the second half. I find that super interesting, but that might just be me.
I noticed that with Hawks games of how normally they shoot at one end of the court to start games, but then I noticed I think last year or 2 years ago where it was they were switching it up, and I noticed it, but I didn't know the rule behind it. So now I do know the rule.
Bud on the road having the option always put his offense in front of him in the second half, always. But it's weird because if you go to a road game, they'll be shooting on a basket. You think, oh, well, that must be the basket they're shooting on in the first half, but actually, no, they're shooting on the basket that's aligned with their bench. And so that sometimes that'll switch it up. But it's going to be interesting because Lloyd Pierce being defensive-minded coach, I'm curious, and we'll probably see in the very first game in Summer League, Utah, if they're the visitor, we'll see if he wants to put his defense in front of him in the second half or his offense in front of him in the second half. And again, nobody else might find that interesting, but I find it fascinating.
Well, then. I am educated. I'm further educated by this. Well, thank you, Glenn, once again for coming on here. Thank you, all the listeners, and we're out of here. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Josh.
All right. Bye.